In the bitter cold of early November 1982, a high-ranking team of scientists at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, huddled around a wall of blinking monitors. Each screen flickered with streams of data from space, an incomprehensible array of numbers and symbols that told the story of the universe. But one signal stood out, a pulsing tone that had been detected 3 days earlier. It was unlike anything they had encountered before. Dr. Emily Harris, a radio astronomer with an unyielding curiosity, stared intently at the screen. The signal's frequency oscillated wildly, almost as if it were alive. The message's pattern was unmistakable. It repeated itself every 24 hours. While the rest of the world was preoccupied with the tensions of the Cold War, Emily sensed something momentous brewing in the cosmos. "Can we enhance it?" she asked, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Her colleague, Dr. Peter Knox, glanced at her with skepticism. "We've already tried every filter. It's too faint to get anything more than background noise." "Look again," Emily insisted, her eyes shining with the thrill of discovery. "What if it's a message? It could be a breakthrough." Reluctantly, Peter began adjusting the controls again, listening to the hum of the machines around them. As they manipulated the dials, the tone grew clearer, revealing a series of rhythmic beeps and static that sent a shiver down Emily's spine. The patterns took shape, creating an eerie sense of urgency. Hours passed as they delved deeper, decoding what they hoped was a message from another civilization. Then, just as Emily was beginning to feel the weight of their failure, she noticed something. The signals were not random. They were mathematical sequences structured like prime numbers, revealing an intelligence behind them. As the realization sank in, an electric atmosphere filled the lab. They had stumbled upon what could only be described as first contact. But just as hope blossomed, an unsettling thought crept into Emily's mind. If the Soviets had access to the same data, what would they do with this knowledge? That night, as the rest of the world slept, Emily couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Shadows danced at the periphery of her vision. It was only a trick of the light, she reassured herself. But deep down, she sensed something far more sinister, lurking in the dark corners of reality. Word of the strange signal quickly spread through the scientific community, but instead of excitement, it bred paranoia. A series of closed-door meetings were called at NASA's headquarters, where the administrators whispered among themselves in hushed tones, calculating the implications of what had been discovered. Meanwhile, in Moscow, the Soviets were on high alert. They had been monitoring American radio frequencies, and whispers of an extraterrestrial signal reached the ears of their intelligence agencies. The KGB was alerted, and soon agents were dispatched to gather intel on NASA's activities. At the center of this brewing storm was Viktor Petrov, a young, ambitious scientist who had recently been promoted within the Soviet space program. He was passionate about exploring the stars, but was also deeply aware of the political ramifications of their work. When he learned about the signal, he couldn't resist the urge to dig deeper. Under the cover of night, Victor met with a clandestine group of scientists known as the Starlight Initiative, a covert organization formed to investigate the possibility of extraterrestrial life. Their leader, an enigmatic figure named Arkady, had ties to the highest echelons of the Soviet government. He believed the signal was proof of alien life and intended to harness it for the glory of the Soviet Union. "Every moment we waste could be an opportunity for the Americans to get ahead of us," Arkady said, his voice low and conspiratorial. "We must act decisively." Victor agreed, the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The Soviets had to intercept the signal and decode it before NASA could announce their findings. He knew that time was of the essence, and the consequences of failure could be catastrophic. Meanwhile, back in the United States, Emily and Peter were blindsided when they received a mysterious warning to abandon their research. The note was typed, the edges burned, as if it had been hastily discarded. "You're playing with fire. Back off before it consumes you." Emily's hands trembled as she clutched the note, her instincts screaming that they were onto something much larger than themselves. "We can't stop now," she said resolutely. "If this is real, we have a duty to share it." Peter hesitated. But what if they're right? What if we're being watched? What if this is something we don't understand? "Then we figure it out together," Emily said, her determination burning bright. They decided to take a gamble, continuing their research in secret, unearthing what they could about the signal and what it might mean. Days turned into weeks, and the signal remained a constant in Emily and Peter's lives. Every day they pored over data, slowly piecing together what could only be described as a cosmic message. But as their understanding grew, so did the danger surrounding them. On a frigid November night, after a long day of work, they received an unexpected visitor. A tall figure clad in a trench coat appeared outside the lab, casting a long shadow in the moonlight. Emily felt a chill race down her spine. As the figure stepped into the light, she recognized him as William Reed, a high-ranking NASA official known for his strict adherence to protocol and secrecy. "What are you doing here, William?" Peter asked, a hint of annoyance creeping into his voice. "Cut the pleasantries. We need to talk," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "In private." They followed him into a secure conference room, the air thick with tension. William closed the door behind them and leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You two have been digging into something you shouldn't. This signal, it's classified." "Classified?" Emily exclaimed, disbelief written all over her face. "We're on the brink of discovering extraterrestrial life." William's eyes narrowed. "You think this is about science? It's about national security. The higher-ups don't want this information getting out. We have no idea what we're dealing with." "Why not?" Peter asked. "This is a historic moment. The world deserves to know." "Because knowledge can be a weapon," William replied sharply. "You have no idea who might be listening, who might be watching. The Soviets are already aware of the signal. If they get their hands on it first, it could change the balance of power." Emily felt her heart race. "So, what are we supposed to do? Pretend it doesn't exist?" William sighed. "You need to cease all research immediately. Destroy everything you've gathered. If you don't, I can't guarantee your safety." Back in her apartment, Emily paced the floor, her mind racing. She glanced at the stack of papers detailing their findings, the meticulously crafted algorithms that hinted at a greater intelligence. Destroying it all felt like abandoning a child, one she had nurtured for weeks. "What if we just shared it?" she suggested to Peter, who sat on the couch, head in his hands. "We could reach out to independent scientists, leak the information to the press. People deserve to know." Peter looked up, concern etched across his face. "And put ourselves in the crosshairs? You heard William. We don't know who's after us. What if the KGB is already watching? What if someone gets hurt?" "Maybe they already are," Emily argued, her voice rising. "If we don't act, the world will never know. This isn't just about us anymore." After hours of heated debate, they came to a decision. They would contact a trusted colleague outside of NASA. Dr. Amir Hassan, an astrophysicist known for his groundbreaking work on cosmic signals, was the perfect candidate. He had the connections and the courage to speak out against the establishment. The next day, under the guise of normalcy, they set up a meeting at a cafe in downtown Pasadena. Emily's heart raced as she approached the cafe, her instincts screaming that they were being followed. A black sedan lingered across the street, its driver's face obscured by the sun's glare. "Emily, over here," Amir waved, a friendly smile lighting up his face. She forced herself to return the gesture, taking a seat across from him. "Thanks for coming," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "What's going on?" he asked, concern flashing in his eyes. Without hesitation, Emily launched into an explanation of the signal and the threat from NASA. As she spoke, she caught a glimpse of the black sedan's driver, dark sunglasses shielding his eyes, watching their every move. A sense of dread settled over her. When she finished, Amir leaned back, absorbing the weight of her words. "This is huge. If what you're saying is true, we need to act fast." Just then, the bell above the cafe door jingled, and Emily's stomach dropped. The driver from the sedan had entered the cafe. He scanned the room with piercing intensity before settling his gaze on their table. "Amir, we need to go," Emily urged, panic rising in her throat. But Amir didn't budge. "We can't just leave. This is too important." Before Emily could argue, the man approached them. He was tall, with a lean build, dressed in a crisp black suit. "Excuse me, Dr. Hassan," he said, his voice smooth but laced with an unsettling authority. "You need to come with me. It's urgent." Emily's breath hitched. "Who are you?" The man ignored her, his gaze fixed on Amir. "I said it's urgent." Amir stood, uncertain. "What is this about?" "I'm not here to discuss it," the man replied, his tone growing more insistent. "Just come with me." Adrenaline surged through Emily as she exchanged a terrified glance with Amir. "We can't trust him," she whispered urgently. "Dr. Harris," the man said, his voice turning cold. "You should come too. I think you'll want to hear what we have to say." Amir hesitated, clearly torn. Emily could see the fear creeping into his eyes. "What if it's a trap?" she urged. "Trust me, it's not," the man insisted. "But the longer you wait, the worse it will get." With no other choice, Emily and Amir stood up, both feeling the weight of impending danger. The man led them out of the cafe and into the bright daylight, where the black sedan awaited. The driver leaned against the car, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "Get in," the man instructed, his voice brooking no argument. "We're on a tight schedule." As they climbed into the back seat, Emily's heart raced. The driver glanced at them in the rearview mirror, eyes dark and unreadable. The man joined them in the back, his demeanor shifting to that of an interrogator. "You both are in serious trouble," he said, his tone lowering, as if to create a sense of intimacy. "You've poked your noses into something that is best left alone." "What do you mean?" Amir asked, his voice trembling. "The signal you found, it's not what you think. There are forces at play that you cannot comprehend," the man warned. "You need to understand that you're not the only ones who know about it." "What does that mean?" Emily pressed, desperation clawing at her throat. "It means the Soviets have been tracking it too, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to get their hands on it. If they find out what you've learned, it could lead to a war beyond anything you can imagine," he replied, the gravity of his words hanging heavy in the air. The driver turned down a dark alley, and Emily glanced out the window, feeling the oppressive atmosphere of the city close in around them. "Who are you?" she demanded. "I'm just a messenger," the man replied. "My name is Agent Moore. What you do next will determine whether you survive." Agent Moore led them to a discreet building on the outskirts of Pasadena. As they entered, the atmosphere shifted from the bright, open streets to a cold, sterile interior filled with the hum of machinery. Emily could feel the tension in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. "Follow me," Moore instructed, guiding them through a series of corridors until they reached a secured room filled with monitors, displaying the same signal they had been studying. "This is our analysis center," Moore said, gesturing to the screens. "We've been monitoring the signal since its discovery. What you found is just the tip of the iceberg." Emily stepped closer, her heart racing as she watched the data scroll across the screens. "What do you mean?" Moore turned, his expression grim. "The signal is a distress call from a civilization far more advanced than our own. They are desperate, and they have sent out a beacon for help. But the Soviets are convinced it's an opportunity to seize control of extraterrestrial technology." Amir exchanged a worried glance with Emily. "And what do you plan to do?" "Intercept the signal and prevent it from falling into the wrong hands," Moore replied. "We need your expertise to decode the rest of it. Time is running out and the Soviets are already closing in." Emily's mind raced with possibilities. This was the opportunity they had been waiting for, but it also felt like a dangerous game of chess, where the stakes were much higher than they had imagined. "Let's do it," she said, determination flooding her voice. "We can't let this opportunity slip away." Days turned into sleepless nights as Emily, Amir, and Moore worked tirelessly to decode the signal. They ran simulations, analysed data, and compared notes. The atmosphere was electric, with anticipation, but the tension in the room was palpable. The threat from the Soviets loomed large, and the clock was ticking. As they delved deeper into the signal, they began to piece together a frightening reality. It wasn't just a distress call, it was a plea for help. The advanced civilization was on the brink of collapse, facing an enemy far more powerful than themselves. "We have to warn them," Amir said one night, his eyes wide with urgency. "If they're truly in danger, we need to find a way to respond." Emily nodded, feeling a strange sense of responsibility. "But how?" "We can't just send a message into the void." Agent Moore's expression darkened. "We might not have a choice. If we don't act, the Soviets will intercept the signal and exploit it. We need to beat them to it." The next day, they decided to push the boundaries of their research. Using advanced equipment and the data they had compiled, they crafted a response, a carefully calculated series of mathematical sequences designed to convey assistance and solidarity. As they sent the message into the cosmos, a sense of hope washed over Emily. Perhaps they could save this civilization from its impending doom. But with every passing hour, the sense of dread intensified. They could feel the presence of the KGB lurking in the shadows, watching their every move. Days later, their fears materialized. Emily and Amir were working late at the lab when they heard the sound of footsteps echoing in the hallway. The door slammed open, and a group of men in dark suits stormed in, their faces a mask of authority and menace. "Step away from the monitors," one of them commanded, his voice cold and unyielding. "You're under arrest for unauthorized research." "What are you talking about?" Emily protested, her heart racing. "We haven't done anything wrong." The men moved swiftly, seizing their equipment and scrambling their data. Emily felt a surge of panic. They couldn't let this happen. They couldn't allow the Soviets to gain control of the information they had uncovered. In a split second, Amir made a decision. "Emily, run! I'll hold them off." "Are you crazy?" she shouted. But he was already moving towards the men, drawing their attention away from her. Heart pounding, Emily slipped out of the lab, sprinting down the dimly lit corridors. She knew the layout of the building well, her mind racing with escape routes. As she rounded a corner, she spotted an emergency exit and dashed towards it, throwing the door open and stepping out into the cool night air. The cold wind hit her like a slap, but she didn't stop. She kept running, her breath coming in sharp bursts as she navigated the shadows of the parking lot. She had to warn Moore. She had to protect the information they had uncovered. Emily managed to contact Agent Moore, who instructed her to meet him at a safe house not far from the lab. As she drove, her mind raced with thoughts of Amir. She couldn't shake the feeling that he might not be safe. When she arrived, Moore was waiting for her, his expression grim. "I heard what happened. The KGB is tightening its grip. We have to move fast." "Where's Amir?" Emily demanded, her heart aching with worry. "Still at the lab," Moore said, his voice heavy with concern. "I'm working on a plan to extract him, but we need to prepare ourselves. The Soviets are not going to let this go easily." The safe house was sparsely furnished, but it felt like a sanctuary compared to the chaos they had just escaped. Emily paced the room, her mind racing with thoughts of the signal and the civilization they were trying to save. They couldn't let the Soviets gain access to it. As they strategized their next move, Emily suddenly felt a sense of foreboding wash over her. She glanced out the window, her instincts on high alert. A car had pulled up outside, and a figure stepped out, scanning the area. "It's them," Moore said, his voice low. "We need to hide." They quickly moved to the back of the house, ducking into a small room filled with supplies. As they waited in silence, Emily's heart raced. She could hear voices approaching, the sound of footsteps growing louder. The door to the safe house burst open, and men in dark suits flooded the room. Emily and Moore remained hidden, their breaths held in suspense. "Search everywhere," one of the men ordered. "They can't have gone far." Emily's heart raced as they ransacked the room, tearing apart furniture and supplies. Just when she thought they might be discovered, the men moved to the next room, giving Emily and Moore a chance to slip out the back door. "We can't stay here," Moore said urgently. "We need to get to a secure location." Emily nodded, adrenaline coursing through her veins. They fled into the night, running through back alleys and deserted streets, desperate to evade their pursuers. As they navigated the city, Emily's thoughts turned to Amir. They had to save him. They couldn't abandon him to the KGB. "I have a plan," she said, her voice steady, despite the fear clawing at her insides. "We need to go back to the lab. If we can access the mainframe, we might be able to extract the data before they can destroy it." Moore hesitated, glancing back at the distant glow of the lab. "It's too dangerous." "Then we have to be quick," Emily insisted. "We can't let them take what we've discovered." Under the cover of darkness, Emily and Moore approached the lab. The building loomed over them, dark and foreboding, but they had no choice. They needed to get inside. Using a side entrance, they crept through the dimly lit hallways, every creak of the floorboards making Emily's heart race. As they reached the mainframe room, she held her breath, praying they wouldn't be discovered. "Let's move," Moore said, urgency lacing his voice. Emily quickly got to work, typing frantically as she accessed the data they had compiled. The monitors flickered to life, revealing the signal's patterns and the response they had sent into the cosmos. As she worked, she felt a surge of hope. They were on the verge of uncovering something monumental, something that could change everything. But just as she was about to finish, the door swung open and the same men from earlier stormed in. Emily's heart dropped. "There they are!" one of the agents shouted, lunging towards them. "Go!" Moore yelled, pushing Emily towards the exit. "I'll hold them off." "No!" she screamed. But it was too late. Moore was already confronting the agents, buying her precious seconds. As Emily dashed towards the door, she glanced back, watching in horror as the agents overwhelmed Moore. The fight felt surreal, the chaos unfurling in slow motion. She had to get out. She had to save what they had worked so hard to uncover. Once outside, Emily ran as fast as she could, heart pounding, adrenaline surging through her veins. She couldn't look back. She had to get to safety. But as she fled, she felt an overwhelming sense of loss wash over her. She couldn't leave Moore behind. He had sacrificed himself for her, for the information they had discovered. Determined, she stumbled into an alleyway, catching her breath. She knew she had to keep the signal alive. The advanced civilization was depending on them. They were on the brink of something monumental, and she wouldn't let it slip away. As she crouched behind a dumpster, Emily pulled out a phone, dialing Amir's number with trembling fingers. It rang, and her heart raced. Would he answer? "Emily?" Amir's voice crackled through the line, relief flooding her heart. "Where are you? What happened?" "I'm at the lab," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "They're here, the KGB. They've taken more." "Damn it," Amir cursed. "I was worried they'd find you. We need to meet. I have a plan." Emily quickly agreed, and they set a rendezvous point in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. As she hung up, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. They would not let this stop them. As Emily made her way to the warehouse, she felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. The loss of Moore weighed heavily in her heart, but she knew that she couldn't let his sacrifice be in vain. They were so close to uncovering the truth, and she was determined to see it through. When she arrived at the warehouse, Amir was already waiting, his expression tense. "You made it," he said, relief flooding his voice. "I had to," Emily replied, feeling the adrenaline surge again. "We need to keep the signal alive. We need to figure out how to respond again." "I have an idea," Amir said, leading her into the dimly lit interior. "We can use this warehouse as a temporary base. I managed to grab some equipment from the lab before they locked it down. We can analyze the data and come up with a new plan." As they set up, Emily felt a flicker of hope. They worked quickly, poring over the data and discussing the next steps. They knew they had to act fast. The KGB was surely on high alert, and they needed to stay one step ahead. Suddenly, the warehouse door burst open and a group of agents stormed in. "There they are," one shouted, lunging towards them. Emily's heart raced as she grabbed Amir's arm. "We have to go," she screamed, dragging him towards the back exit. As they fled through the shadows, they could hear the agents shouting behind them, their footsteps echoing ominously. Emily could feel the adrenaline coursing through her, urging her to run faster. They had to get away. After narrowly escaping the agents, Emily and Amir found refuge in an abandoned building near the outskirts of town. They barricaded themselves inside, hearts racing as they caught their breath. "We need to figure out our next move," Amir said, his voice tense with urgency. Emily nodded, still feeling the adrenaline coursing through her. "We need to access the data again. If we can decipher more of the signal, we might find a way to respond that the KGB can't intercept." As they set up their makeshift lab in the dim light of the building, Emily felt a sense of determination settle over her. They were so close to uncovering the truth, and she wouldn't let anything stop them. Hours passed as they worked tirelessly, analyzing the data they had. Just as they began to decipher a new pattern in the signal, a loud crash echoed from the front of the building. "They're here," Amir whispered, his eyes wide with fear. "Quick, we have to hide," Emily urged, looking for a place to escape. They ducked behind a stack of crates just as the door burst open and agents poured into the room. "Search the building," one shouted. "They can't have gone far." Emily held her breath, heart racing as they listened to the agents scouring the building, tearing through boxes and equipment. "We need to get out of here," Amir whispered urgently. "If they find us..." Before he could finish his sentence, one of the agents stumbled upon their hiding place, eyes narrowing in realization. "There they are!" he shouted, lunging towards them. Emily and Amir scrambled to their feet, dashing towards the back exit just as the agents closed in. They burst through the door, sprinting into the night. The night air was cold and sharp against their skin as Emily and Amir ran through the empty streets, adrenaline propelling them forward. They could hear the agents' footsteps behind them, echoing in the darkness, urging them to run faster. "Where do we go?" Amir gasped, glancing around for any place to hide. "There!" Emily pointed to a nearby alleyway, and they dashed into it, pressing their backs against the cool brick wall as they tried to catch their breath. They could hear the agents approaching, their voices growing louder. "They went this way," one shouted. "Don't let them escape." As the footsteps drew closer, Emily's mind raced. They needed a plan. "We can't let them capture us," she whispered urgently. "We have to split up." "Are you crazy?" Amir protested. "We'll never find each other again." "We don't have a choice. If they catch both of us, it'll be over," Emily insisted. "I'll go left, you go right. We'll meet back at the warehouse." Amir hesitated, but then nodded. "Okay. Be careful." With a final glance at each other, they took off in opposite directions, hearts pounding in their chests. Emily ran down the narrow alley, her mind racing as she searched for a place to hide. Emily darted into a nearby building, slipping through the back entrance just as she heard the agents rounding the corner. Inside, the atmosphere was dark and musty, filled with the scent of stale air and dust. She could hear the agents' voices outside, searching for any sign of movement. She pressed her back against the wall, heart racing as she strained to hear their conversation. "Split up and search the area," one agent ordered. "They can't have gone far." Emily held her breath, praying they wouldn't find her. She waited for what felt like an eternity, listening to their footsteps fade as they moved further away. Once she was sure they were gone, she made her way through the darkened building, searching for a way out. As she moved through the empty halls, she stumbled upon a room filled with old equipment. Among the clutter, she spotted a radio. With a rush of excitement, she approached it, desperate for a way to communicate with Amir. She quickly began to fiddle with the dials, trying to find a frequency. The static crackled to life, and she held her breath, hoping against hope that she could reach him. "Amir? Can you hear me?" she called into the radio, her voice shaking with urgency. "Emily." Amir's voice crackled through the static, relief washing over her. "Where are you?" "I'm in an old building near the warehouse," she replied, her heart racing. "I think I lost the agents, but we need to regroup. I found a radio. We can use it to stay in touch." "Good idea," Amir said. "I'm hiding out in a basement. I'll try to make my way back to you." "Be careful," Emily warned. "They're still looking for us. I'll keep this radio on and let you know if I see or hear anything." "Same here," Amir replied. "Stay safe." They ended the conversation and Emily settled into a corner of the room, keeping the radio close as she waited for Amir to arrive. She couldn't shake the feeling of dread gnawing at her insides. They had come so far, and they couldn't let everything slip away now. As the hours passed, Emily felt the weight of uncertainty settle over her. The silence of the abandoned building felt suffocating, each creak of the floorboards making her heart race. She tried to keep her mind focused, but worry gnawed at her. "Where are you, Amir?" she whispered to herself, glancing at the radio every few minutes. Finally, she heard a faint noise outside the door. Her heart leapt into her throat, and she pressed her ear to the door, listening intently. It could be agents, or it could be Amir. The sound grew closer, and she couldn't take it anymore. Holding her breath, she slowly opened the door and peered out. To her immense relief, it was Amir. He stood there, slightly disheveled but unharmed, a look of determination in his eyes. "You're safe," he said, rushing towards her. "I was worried you wouldn't make it," Emily breathed, relief flooding through her. "I had to dodge a few agents, but I managed," Amir replied. "What's our next move?" "I found a radio," Emily explained, pulling him into the room. "We can use it to communicate, but we need to figure out how to respond to the signal." Amir nodded, looking around the room filled with equipment. "Let's see what we can find. We need to work quickly." As they began to sift through the clutter, Emily's mind raced with possibilities. They were still one step ahead, but time was running out. The KGB would not give up easily, and they needed to stay vigilant. Emily and Amir worked diligently, piecing together the information they had gathered. They were determined to find a way to counteract the threat posed by the KGB. As they examined the data, a plan began to take shape. "What if we could send a signal back that would lead the Soviets away from us?" Amir suggested, his eyes lighting up with excitement. "We could create a decoy." Emily's heart raced at the thought. "Yes, if we can make it seem like we're somewhere else, it might buy us time to get the data we need." They quickly got to work, utilizing the equipment around them to formulate a plan. As they programmed the radio to emit a false signal, they could feel the weight of the world on their shoulders. "Let's hope this works," Emily said, her voice tense with anticipation. As they finished their preparations, they transmitted the decoy signal into the air, hoping to mislead the KGB and give themselves a chance to escape. "Now we just have to wait," Amir said, glancing at the radio. "If they take the bait, we might have a window to get the data and reach out to the civilization." Just as they settled in, the radio crackled to life. "We have a response," Amir shouted, his eyes widening. What does it say? Emily asked, leaning closer. It's from the signal we sent out, Amir said, frantically analysing the data. They're replying. Emily's heart raced as she listened to the transmission, feeling a sense of hope surge within her. They were on the verge of something incredible, something that could change everything. But just as they began to decode the response, the door burst open and agents flooded the room. There they are, one of the agents shouted, lunging towards them. Run, Emily yelled, grabbing Amir's hand as they dashed for the exit. They sprinted down the hall, hearts pounding, as they heard the agents chasing after them. The building felt like a maze, but they couldn't stop now. They had to keep moving. As they reached the back exit, Emily glanced back to see the agents gaining on them. We need to split up, she shouted again, urgency coursing through her veins. Are you sure? Amir asked, fear flickering in his eyes. Trust me, she replied, her voice firm. I'll create a distraction. Before he could protest, Emily pushed him toward the side exit and turned back toward the agents, her heart racing as she prepared to confront them. Hey, over here, she shouted, drawing their attention away from Amir. Get her! One of the agents barked, and Emily bolted into another hallway, adrenaline surging through her. Emily ran through the darkened building, the sound of the agent's footsteps echoing behind her. She knew she had to keep them away from Amir. As she turned a corner, she stumbled into a room filled with equipment. It looked like a makeshift lab, and a glimmer of hope sparked within her. If she could find something to defend herself or create a distraction, it might give Amir the chance he needed. She scanned the room, her heart pounding. There, a container filled with old chemicals and lab equipment caught her eye. With no time to waste, she grabbed a few items and quickly formulated a plan. As the agents closed in, Emily set off a small explosion, the loud bang echoing through the building. The agents were momentarily stunned, giving her the precious seconds she needed to slip out of the room and escape down a different hallway. Amir, she called, hoping he was still safe. She had to find him and get out of there before it was too late. After what felt like an eternity of running, Emily finally found Amir hiding in a storage room, his face lighting up with relief as he saw her. You made it, he said, pulling her into a tight embrace. Barely, Emily replied, catching her breath. I created a distraction. We have to go now. They hurried through the back exit, hearts racing as they navigated through the darkened streets. They could still hear the agents calling out for them, but they were one step ahead. Where do we go? Amir asked, glancing around frantically. We need to get to the safe house, Emily said, determination flooding her voice. It's our best shot. As they sprinted towards the safe house, Emily couldn't shake the feeling of impending danger. They had come too far to let it all slip away now. When they arrived at the safe house, they quickly barricaded the door and took a moment to catch their breath. We need to regroup and plan our next move, Amir said, his eyes scanning the room. Emily nodded, her mind racing. They had to find a way to respond to the signal again and ensure the advanced civilization would receive their message. Let's analyze the response we got, Emily suggested, moving towards the equipment they had set up earlier. We need to decipher it and figure out how to communicate back. As they worked together, the atmosphere in the safe house felt charged with urgency. They knew they were running out of time, and the stakes were higher than ever. Just as they began to make progress, the sound of footsteps echoed outside the door. Emily's heart sank. They found us, she whispered, fear clawing at her throat. Quick, we need to hide, Amir urged, scanning the room for a place to escape. They ducked behind a set of shelves, holding their breath as the door burst open. An agent stormed in. Search everywhere, one of them ordered, their voices laced with urgency. Emily and Amir huddled together, hearts pounding as they listened to the agents search the room. The tension in the air was thick, and Emily could feel her heart racing in her chest. As the agents continued to scour the room, Emily and Amir exchanged worried glances. They had to think quickly. We can't let them take the data, Emily whispered urgently. If they get it, it's all over. Amir nodded, determination flashing in his eyes. We need to create a diversion. If we can distract them long enough, we might be able to escape out the back. What do we have? Emily asked, scanning the room for anything they could use. Amir's eyes fell on a nearby stack of supplies. I think I saw some flares earlier. If we can set them off. Great idea, Emily said, her heart racing with renewed hope. While the agents continued their search, they quietly gathered the flares and made their way to the back exit. Emily felt the adrenaline surge through her as they prepared their escape. On my count, Amir whispered, glancing at her. 3, 2, 1, now. They set off the flares, and the bright light illuminated the room, temporarily blinding the agents. Over here, one of them shouted, and Emily seized the moment, dragging Amir towards the back exit. They sprinted through the back door and into the alley, hearts racing as they heard the agents shouting behind them. Keep running, Emily urged, glancing back to see the agents emerging from the safe house, their faces twisted with rage. They darted down the alley, adrenaline propelling them forward. They needed to get to the rendezvous point. Where do we go now? Amir gasped, his breath coming in short bursts. There's an old train yard nearby, Emily said, trying to recall the map in her mind. If we can reach it, we can hide there until we figure out our next move. They sprinted towards the train yard, the sound of the agent's footsteps echoing behind them. They could feel the urgency in the air, and they pushed themselves to run faster. When they finally reached the train yard, they ducked behind a rusted old train car, breathless and trembling. We made it, Amir said, leaning against the car, relief flooding his voice. For now, Emily replied, her heart still racing. But we need to keep moving. We can't let them find us. As they caught their breath behind the train car, Emily felt a moment of calm wash over her. They had escaped, but the danger was far from over. We need to regroup and plan our next steps, Amir said, looking at her with determination. Emily nodded, her mind racing. We need to analyze the response we received and find a way to reach out again. We can't let the KGB stop us. They began to sift through their equipment, trying to piece together the data they had gathered. Every moment counted, and they needed to act fast. As they worked, Emily couldn't shake the feeling of dread that hung over them. They were on the brink of something monumental, but the threat of the KGB loomed over them like a dark cloud. Emily, Amir said suddenly, pulling her from her thoughts. Look at this. He pointed to a series of readings on the screen, and Emily leaned in closer, heart racing as she processed the information. It's the signal, Amir continued, excitement creeping into his voice. If we can respond to this in the right way, we might be able to establish a two-way communication. Emily felt a surge of hope. Yes, if we can do that, we might be able to warn the civilization and find a way to save ourselves. As they worked tirelessly to prepare their response, Emily felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. The clock was ticking, and they had to finish before the KGB caught up to them. Almost done, Amir said, his fingers flying over the keyboard. Just a few more adjustments. Come on, Amir, Emily urged, her heart pounding. We need to hurry. Just then, the sound of footsteps echoed through the yard, growing closer. They're coming, Emily whispered, panic surging through her. Just a little longer, Amir insisted, focused on the screen. Emily felt a sense of urgency swell within her. They couldn't let the KGB stop them now. They were so close. With a final keystroke, Amir hit enter and the screen lit up with a confirmation message. We did it, he exclaimed, relief flooding his voice. Now let's get out of here, Emily said, grabbing Amir's hand and pulling him towards the exit. They sprinted through the yard, hearts racing, as they heard the agents shouting behind them. As they emerged from the train yard, the world outside felt both familiar and foreign. The streets were quiet, but they knew the danger was still lurking in the shadows. We need to find a safe place to regroup, Amir said, glancing around. There's an old cafe nearby, Emily suggested. We can hide there until things calm down. They made their way to the cafe, slipping inside and finding a secluded booth in the back. Now what? Amir asked, his voice tense. Now we wait for a response, Emily replied, her heart racing. We need to make sure they received our signal. As they sat in silence, the tension in the air was palpable. Every sound felt amplified, and Emily could feel her heart pounding in her chest. Finally, the radio crackled to life and Emily's heart leapt. This is it, she whispered, leaning closer. Emily? Amir said, glancing at her. Shh, she replied, focusing on the static. After a moment, a voice emerged from the crackle, clear and strong. We received your signal. We are preparing a response. Emily felt tears of relief prick at her eyes. They got it. Amir grinned, his face lighting up with excitement. This is it. We're finally making contact. As they listened intently to the radio, the voice continued. We understand the danger you are in. We have resources to help. Prepare for extraction. Emily and Amir exchanged astonished glances, hope flooding their hearts. They were not alone in this fight. Extraction, Amir echoed, eyes wide. They're going to help us? Yes, Emily said, feeling the weight of their struggles begin to lift. We just have to stay alive long enough to meet them. They quickly began to strategize, mapping out their next steps. We need to find a way to communicate our exact location, Amir said. Emily nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. If we can get to a high point, we might be able to send a clearer signal. Let's go, Amir said, determination surging within him. As they left the cafe, the air felt charged with energy. They were on the brink of a new beginning, and they wouldn't let the KGB stop them now. As they navigated the streets, the reality of their situation began to sink in. They had made contact with the civilization, but the KGB was still on their trail. Keep your head down, Emily whispered, glancing around for any signs of danger. They reached a nearby park, where the trees provided cover from prying eyes. We need to find a vantage point, Amir said, scanning the area. There, Emily pointed to a small hill in the distance. If we can get up there, we should be able to send a signal. They sprinted towards the hill, hearts racing, as they felt the urgency of their mission. Just as they reached the top, they heard the sound of footsteps behind them. They're here, Amir exclaimed, glancing back to see agents closing in. Quick, we need to set up the equipment, Emily shouted, pulling out the radio and hastily connecting the wires. As they worked, they could hear the agents shouting below, their voices growing louder. Don't let them escape, one shouted. With trembling hands, Emily adjusted the radio dials, trying to establish a clear connection. We have to hurry, she urged, her heart pounding in her chest. Almost there, Amir shouted, focusing intently on the equipment. Just as they began to get a signal, the agents reached the base of the hill, shouting for them to stop. Emily, Amir called, panic lacing his voice. We need to hurry. I'm trying, she replied, her fingers flying over the dials. Just a few more seconds. Finally, the radio crackled to life, and the voice from the civilization echoed through the static. We are receiving your location. Prepare for extraction. Yes, we did it, Amir shouted, relief washing over them. Now we just need to hold on until they get here, Emily said, glancing back at the agents who were beginning to climb the hill. With the agents closing in, Emily and Amir stood their ground at the top of the hill, ready to defend themselves. We won't let them take us, Amir said, determination etched on his face. Agreed, Emily replied, her heart racing as she glanced at the radio. We have to keep this signal alive until the extraction team arrives. As the agents reached the top of the hill, they exchanged tense glances with Emily and Amir. Hand over the equipment, one of the agents shouted, advancing towards them. Never, Emily shouted back, gripping the radio tightly. Get them, the agent ordered, and they charged forward. Emily and Amir braced themselves, ready for a fight. They had come too far to let the KGB take them now. Just as the agents lunged at them, a flash of light erupted in the sky. Emily and Amir shielded their eyes, and when they looked up, a small spacecraft descended from above, illuminating the night. Get to the ship, a voice shouted from above, and Emily felt a rush of hope. Let's go, Amir yelled, grabbing her hand and pulling her towards the ship. They sprinted towards the glowing craft, the agents shouting behind them in confusion. "Don't stop," Emily urged, her heart pounding as they reached the ship's entrance. With one final burst of energy, they leaped inside, and the door sealed shut behind them. "We made it," Amir gasped, breathing heavily as they turned to face the controls. "Now let's get out of here," Emily said, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. As the spacecraft shot off into the sky, Emily and Amir watched the Earth recede beneath them, their hearts filled with a mix of relief and excitement. "We did it," Amir said, disbelief evident in his voice. "Together," Emily replied, a sense of gratitude washing over her. They had faced insurmountable odds, but they had made it. "Now what?" Amir asked, glancing at the control panel. "Now we find out what the civilization has to offer," Emily said, her eyes shining with hope. "We have a new beginning ahead of us." As the ship soared into the unknown, they knew that this was just the beginning of their journey. A journey filled with endless possibilities and the promise of a brighter future.